Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we've just been to see It Was Just an Accident, a thriller written and directed by Jafar Panahi, one of the most celebrated Iranian filmmakers. Extremely well known for being in conflict with the Iranian government for at least 15 years, probably longer. I know in 2010 he was sentenced to 6 years in prison and a 20-year ban on filmmaking, based on charges of propaganda against the Islamic Republic. Didn't stop him making films, and possibly his best-known film was made under, I believe, house arrest, which was This Is Not a Film, which I think was made on a phone. I think it was smuggled into Cannes on a cake. But, I mean, he's continued to make films essentially illegally and clandestinely and so on since then, and this is his latest, made under those conditions.
And he's now in jail as a result.
Oh, has he been jailed again?
Yes. I mean, double check it, but I believe so.
2025 sentencing, so from Wikipedia. In December 2025, Iran sentenced Panahi to 1 year in prison in absentia and a travel ban over propaganda activities, in quotes, against the nation. The sentence also included a 2-year ban on leaving Iran and prohibited Panahi from joining any political or social organisations. Panahi's lawyer announced that they would be seeking an appeal regarding the sentencing. So that's the latest.
You can see why.
Yeah.
Because this is a highly political film. It's a real denunciation of the torture, corruption, and violence done to the Iranian people by the current regime. And it's also a defiance of, all of the rules that they use to oppress. So, for example, I was very surprised that, none of the women in the film wore the veil, right? And one of the women wore trousers throughout, right? Which I believe is illegal in Iran. Yeah, the kind of going without a hijab.
I believe going without the hijab is. I don't know about the rest of the mode of dress, but yeah.
So it's quite something, and I love it. And it reminded me a little bit of Kiarostami's First Case, Second Case. Yeah, which is so it's about a school teacher. The students get annoyed with him, throw chalk, and then the whole thing revolves around who did it, right? But actually, the questioning of who did it becomes a philosophical kind of issue.
Yeah.
Right? Do you squeal on your friends?
Yeah.
And I think this film is a little bit like that. It begins as something, and then it kind of unfolds into a philosophical discussion about, what is right, vengeance.
It reminded me of Juror Number 2 in that sense as well. Again, like the thriller aspect of it is very nuts and bolts. So I should say the story here is that someone goes to a garage to get their car fixed, having hit an animal, and a mechanic at that garage hears the sound of this guy's prosthetic leg, hears the squeak. And initially, I mean, this is not explained, you don't know what's going on with this guy, but he has to follow this guy, find out what's going on. And what he ultimately realises is that he believes, just from the sound, that he recognises that this guy was an instrument of the state, of the regime.
A state torturer.
A torturer who tortured him, interrogated him, had him in prison, had him blindfolded. No one recognises this guy because they were always blindfolded. But the question is, can they tell who it was? And for this first character who recognised him, it's from the leg. And the question is, so basically, the question is this the right guy? His name is not the name that they recognise according to his ID, but can they find out if it is? And so another person gets called, all these people who had been tortured by the regime for various reasons are asked, are become involved. Can they recognise this guy? And as you say, the question then becomes bigger than that. It's what has the behaviour of the regime, whether this is the real guy or not. For a long time, you wonder whether you're actually even going to get an answer to this, So, like I say, the thriller aspect is nuts and bolts. Who is this guy? Are we going to find out? But, as you say, it becomes this question of what has the regime done to us? What is the effect it's had on us? So some people are preaching non-violence. Others are incredibly vengeful and pretty much want to kill him immediately, regardless of establishing, for kind of as concretely as possible if it's him or not. And that's where the brilliance of the film is, I think.
And it's so clever, So, for example, the guy's unsure, so he goes to talk to a friend who works in a bookshop, and the friend says, whether he's guilty or not, you mustn't do this, right? Yeah. Because it would make of you what they are. Exactly. Right. But then, he goes, here's someone who might identify them, and it's a photographer. And with the photographer is a woman who's just about to be married, who was also tortured, right? And so these little things become so highly symbolic. So, here is someone all dressed in white, on the verge of starting a new life the next day. Yeah, is her new life going to be ruined by the past? Yeah.
But the reveal of that is so great, because he's been put in touch with this photographer, and so he goes to see her. She's busy. She's taking photos of this newlywed couple. They're not part of the story, but he's imposing himself. She's like, "No, leave me alone. I want to get on with my job. I'm not interested in this." He won't let it go, so he disturbs them, and eventually, when the couple are going like, "What is going on?" she says, he's found Pegleg, this guy's name is the torturer. He's found Pegleg, and the woman in the couple suddenly comes alive. What the fuck, Pegleg? So you have no idea until then that she had this history, but she's not just a client; she's a friend of hers, and they have this history. And like the fact that just explodes out of nowhere, and she suddenly becomes involved. It's I think it's a really brilliantly structured reveal.
It is, and one of the things that is so damning in the film is that at every stage, or almost every episode on this moral and ethical journey, is punctuated by corruption. Everyone wants money. Everyone wants a tip. Everyone is very nice, but like everyone asks for a payment, and it's kind of extortionate, right? In the sense that they call it a tip, but really kind of you have to do it. They always put a higher number than you're willing to give, right? And this extends from security guards in a parking lot to the secretary in a hospital, right? Like,
it seems like there's an element of it being cultural and an element of it being taken advantage of because it's cultural, in a way. So when those security guards who see something clearly is going on with these people, they don't know what, they're like, basically, in order to let this go, you're going to have to pay us. And when they don't have cash, they say, "Oh, we've got a card machine," which I sort of took as a joke. Although it does seem, because you see it again in the film, you kind of think maybe people do seem to carry these things on them.
Well,
a bit.
Everything's changed post-COVID, though.
I know. But those guys are clearly just taking a bribe. It's just a pure bribe. Whereas at the hospital, it seems to have more of it's an element of bribery to it, I suppose, but it's more of a kind of cultural, like, here is a way in which we make our money. So it's the baby's born, and the pastries are what's it, a kind of normal gifts. I can't think of.
Well, the pastries are a normal gift, but
then the tipping
that goes with tipping the receptionist who had initially refused you because you can't go into the hospital without. Can you imagine this? You can't be admitted into a hospital if your husband is not present.
Yeah.
Right. So because they make an exception, the receptionist, who was quite happy to see the woman die, is now asking for a tip. Because the doctor agreed to take responsibility for what happened.
Of course, there's the other guy in the middle who when they're filling with petrol, and he fills the car for them, and he puts the thing in, he goes, "Shall I add another zero? Go on, share the love around because you're getting married." But he's only joking, and actually, like, so the culture, I guess, of being on the make constantly is also, like, that guy's kind of aware of it. He's like, "No, I'm only joking," Although he does add himself a little tip and goes, "Is that okay?"
Yes. So he's not that joking. I mean, and actually, you see, I mean, for me, it really kind of brought back memories of childhood. And it was like, the thing that I hate is most, well, I was a child, so I'm sure there were many things that were worse, but what I remember, like, really hating was that sense that you have to buy everyone a gift, i.e. an equivalent of tipping, for just doing the fucking job, right? Like, kind of, everybody's palm had to be greased, right? Like,
exactly.
Which is always a sign that there's no rule of law, Yeah, because if there was a rule of law, you wouldn't need to do that, right? Kind of, you wouldn't have this tipping, which of course, because it's tipping, the number's completely elastic, right? And it depends on how much somebody likes you and whether you've done them a favor recently, and the stresses and the expense, and the hypocrisy, that adds to everyday life. It's just so tiring and exhausting and unjust, that I just hate it. And that's one of the things that this film reveals, right? But maybe even in a worse degree than what I remember of my childhood in Spain in the last years of the dictatorship.
And of course, one of the first things that the suspected peg leg, does when he's captured and is thrown into a shallow grave that our main character digs is he says, "Take my card. Here's my PIN number. Take what you want." Of course, the one thing is these guys can't be bought by that, right? Like what they're after is
justice,
not money. Yeah, exactly. And I guess if we've gone far enough, we will be talking spoilers and things. What the film ultimately leaves you with is a question of what justice is, or is it worth it? Did they do the right thing? So ultimately, at the end, it is established that this guy is peg leg. They have got the right guy.
Yes.
He remembers everything. He does know them. I mean, the one character he talks about being ashamed that he couldn't get her to confess. He remembers her. Despite the fact they never take his blindfold off, he does remember her, and they let him live. Because we've been through this situation where they've also helped his wife give birth, as we've talked about in the hospital. They've seen he's got a daughter. He's very young. But, we've been through this question of what is the right thing to do. It starts off with throwing him in a grave. They end up not killing him. But the one character in particular, the woman, the photographer, has been speaking on a few occasions about not acting violently.
Yeah.
We've also had the other character who is incredibly vengeful. And the moment that he feels the guy's leg, and he goes, "I remember. He made me feel his scars.
Yes.
So I know it's him." And he explodes. Like he's trying to get at him, and they're trying to hold him back. So that's when this question of violence versus non-violence comes up, and he's just on the warpath. And eventually, because they won't let him do what he wants, basically, he leaves. But then when it comes to the confrontation at the end, the woman who has been trying to keep a level head throughout the whole thing and keep everyone else level-headed, gets close to becoming a torturer herself.
But not, because actually the thing that this man has done to them is so horrible. So it's clear that it's sexual violations, that, they say they removed all your dignity. They beat the guy so badly that he's got one kidney sticking out of his back and can't do certain kinds of jobs. So it's not comparable, right? She loses her temper and slaps him in the face. That's what she does.
Well, the film is, I think, definitely drawing a comparison between the kinds of torture and treatment that they were put through and what she's doing to him. It's not to the same degree, but, he's tied up, he's blindfolded, she's slapping him, she's
slapping him, etc. But so I think you're right. The film is making that comparison, but I'm making a distinction. And also, of course, what happens at the end is that they let him live. Which again, it's an ethical dilemma, right? Because if they kill him, they're safe. If they let him live, he's a danger. So if they let him live, he might ruin all of their lives once again, right? And so they decide to let him live, knowing that he's guilty, and
knowing that he's potentially dangerous.
Yes,
but what the film leaves us on is this ambiguity of. So I mean, that final scene is so wonderful.
Yeah.
So we've got our main character, Vadim, I think his name is, essentially trying to resume his normal life again. He's helping his mum. I don't know what the thing was that they kept on talking about through the film. It's a French word. There's some kind. They're moving or something, right? And the camera is situated at the corner of the house, so it can pan left and you see the vehicle, and then you pan right and you see inside the house, and the camera's constantly panning back and forth as he moves. And all I'm thinking is, at some point, he's going to show up in this shot, like a horror movie villain does, like a ghost in a mirror sort of thing. What actually happens is, as Vadim is walking away from camera back into the house, you just hear the squeak of the peg leg again. But the ambiguity about it is it real? Has he been found? Is it just in his head that this won't leave him?
You see, for me it wasn't.
Yeah.
For me it was clear that it was him. What wasn't clear is where that would lead to, because he had promised, that if they let him live, he wouldn't do anything about it. Though, of course. So now the question is, he's there. Is it just for a conversation or is it for revenge? So I felt your ambiguity was for different reasons, really.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I think to me that ambiguity that I've described is what's built into it, because obviously the potential is that he's actually there, but to me it's just as plausible. The reading is just as plausible that this is in his head. That whatever they've been through, the torture that they've been through, the way that things have stayed, and we've seen how all of this has stayed with these characters because it brings back all of these emotions and everything. It could be this kind of mental expression of, even though I'm just going about my daily business, it's always there. It's in my head still. Yes. And it can make me freeze.
Yes. That could be a reading, though. My thinking was he was there.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why he didn't turn around. Yeah. He was kind of, putting the moment off of, having to face what might be coming. Right?
Yeah.
But it's a brilliant movie. It's all stolen. You see all of the shots of the city, and you're seeing them through a car, or it was clearly filmed without permits. And I just think it's such a brave movie to be making this movie with all of the people involved. I mean, what courage, when you think of what's happening in the United States, and not a bloody, American artist is doing anything comparable, certainly not in film, right? I mean, I'm just kind of gobsmacked with admiration, really. First at the attempt, but then at making something so great, because these Iranian films are very interesting to me, because, they don't have all of the things that I love about cinema. I love a particular kind of cinema, right, which is, superb mise en scène, shots, and kind of you want to see all the intelligence of all the various elements in the frame and how they dramatize whatever. I mean, this is simple, it's sparse. It really is about the story, kind of told through performers and dialogue mainly. The camera almost just gets out of the way. You have these incredibly long shots, kind of. Which is not
to say that it doesn't look good. I mean, I think it's possible for that description of this kind of filmmaking, these kinds of films, to imply that they are not visually expressive and well designed and everything. Despite they've had to go and snatch things where they can, or make kind of work their way around the lack of permits and so on. But there's no point in this film where you're going, oh, this feels on the hoof, or this feels kind of hastily made.
No, it's because I think the story is so well told. And it's such a great story. And it's so well told audiovisually, right? Because, what you're describing at the end, just the sound on someone's back, I mean, that is an audiovisual kind of imaginative device on which to end, right? But I'm just saying, it's the kind of thing that requires kind of so much tightness and imagination and dramaturgy, really, because you can't count on other elements to kind of help tell the story. It is kind of a cinema of poverty, really. It's quite sparse, right? But it's great.
Or a cinema of resistance.
Yes,
it might also be called, because it's working around these restrictions.
Sure.
Like I say, it's that true spirit of a filmmaker where, no matter what, this is how I speak. I have to tell my stories. And in the case of Jafar Panahi, it's under constant restriction, surveillance, and sometimes prison time.
Yes.
But, they can't stop him.
Yes.
Right.
Well, that's true. And not just to give credit to him, because one of the things that I was thinking, the most visible people in this film are the actors, right? Who kind of presumably continue to live in Iran, right? So what are the consequences of these actions on them, right? I think, it's a collaborative kind of resistance, really.
Yeah.
But anyway, aside from that, and aside from, the political element and so on, it is just a gripping story. I was involved throughout, right? And every time it progressed, there was like a little kind of turn of the screw, right? Like,
Yeah.
so kind of, it led into a different direction of suspense, and it's funny, but also what I was saying earlier about almost like this moral and ethical, the complexities of a moral and ethical dilemma unfurling, getting more complex, exploring kind of every twist in the dilemma. It's really great.
I think another thing that we haven't quite touched on, which I think is what the ending really is about, and I think the ending kind of tells you, it kind of sums up, I think, what the film is trying to tell you, is not so much about the morality of what their response is to the situation they find themselves in. That is obviously a constant question the film is raising. But I think what the film is really telling you it's about at the end, with that ambiguity that I described, is it's about the effect that all this has on the people. So the reason that I think it comes through that ambiguity is because whether Pegleg is actually there or not, or whether he's there or whether he's imagining this, the effect is the same. He believes that he's there. The effect that it has on him, he freezes and that. Yeah. So, and that's what you see in the rest of the film, is the effect that the torture and the imprisonment had on all of these people. So it's not just how are they going to respond to it, but it's how does it make them? How do they change? Like I say, when the bride hears the name Pegleg, she changes, she flips, and suddenly her whole story changes.
Well,
it's like that. That to me is what the film. It's talking about these kind of regimes, and the kind of the trauma and the long-term effect they have on the people who are subject to them. I think that's really it just feels really, really vividly expressed.
For me, it captures that fear and insecurity of living under a dictatorship. Because, here you have these people going around the city, with a drugged man on the back of a van, and nothing happens to them, right? And then they just go on strike because they haven't been paid for 8 months, which seems really reasonable to me. And they end up being tortured. The wife of one dies, they lose their jobs, their lives get destroyed. I think those are kind of that ambiance of fear, and also insecurity and imbalance that kind of authoritarian regimes bring, because the law is what they say it is. And so that can change at any moment, really.
In fact, it was surprising, because one of the things is why were these people in particular taken by the regime? Why were they imprisoned? Why were they tortured? And when it turns out it's to do with having been on strike, it was kind of, to me, that was kind of, as someone who's not overly familiar with the Iranian regime, things they've done, my main point of contact with this kind of story was Rosewater, which was Jon Stewart's debut film as a director. So he had this journalist on, Mazir Bahari, on The Daily Show years ago. In fact, he wasn't on The Daily Show. He wasn't on as an interviewee, but they sent one of their comedians to Iran to do kind of a field comedy from Iran on the ground. And they did this piece with Mazir Bahari in a cafe in Iran. And the comedian Jason Jones was pretending to be a spy. He was like dressed up as a spy, but they were being filmed for TV. It's clearly comedy. Mazir Bahari wasn't being playful and stuff himself. He was just answering the questions honestly. This is what life in Iran is like, and so on. And it was partially on the basis of that comedy piece that Mazir Bahari was arrested, imprisoned for a long time, and when he eventually came out, he wrote about it, and that book, the Daily Show then had become quite intimately entwined with his story, because it was partially on like the Iranian authorities were going, what is this? You're talking to an American spy. It's like, no, this is a TV show, it's a comedy. But they just didn't see it that way. They didn't buy it. Ultimately, Jon Stewart said, I want to make a film of this. But the point is that, I think that was under a wave of political arrests for journalists. and people who were seen as speaking out against the regime. And to me, because that was kind of my point of contact with arrests under the Iranian regime, I was like, yeah, it's all political. It's all people speaking out. And so when you hear, no, these are regular people who were working and went on strike, and that's why they were arrested. It's much more kind of prosaic. It's much less political. It's much more these people are just trying to fight for their wages.
Yeah, but that's considered political.
Yeah, no. But you see what I mean, right? Like it's a much less kind of heightened reason to arrest them.
They're not some secret terrorist group or something.
That's where I'm getting at. Yeah, so like that's an interesting sort of, for me at least, that was an interesting, a bit of an eye opener. It's like that this is the kind of things that were going on in this country, or still are.
And for me, the other thing that is worth remarking on is the torture's defense, which is what you get in this kind of religious settings, right? And that applies to medieval Christianity and now some aspects of the MAGA cult, which is, if you're guilty, you deserve what you get. And if we made a mistake, Allah will reward you. Yeah, exactly. So that's their sense of justice. We can do anything we want, because even whenever we're wrong, Allah will reward you. Yeah, right?
Which is interesting, because it's not the same as saying we are religiously justified in doing this. Like very often religious regimes, it's like we have the backing of the church, we have the backing of God. It's not that. It's saying no matter what we do, God will square it, so it's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not the same. It's
which is a complete disregard for law, really.
Yeah.
I kind of, no matter what we do, God will square it.
and his other defense in that confrontation scene is I had to make a living.
I know, which is another. It's a Nuremberg trial, non-defense, right?
Yeah. Sure.
So anyway, it's a really complex film that feels very clear at every moment. And that works on a level of suspense, also has a lot of humor, and yet it's a film about complex things. Yeah.
It was making me think. I'm surprised you haven't brought it up more vociferously, the comparison with Trump's America. But it was making me think about kind of, what the equivalent might be under Trump's America. I mean, the thing is, in terms of the filmmaking, there are not these restrictions in America, so kind of by its nature, you don't have a filmmaker fighting to get his film made in the same way. But as you're saying, we haven't really seen this kind of thing, I think, for American cinema. But I was also thinking, in terms of we're thinking about ICE snatching people off the street. We see any number of smartphone videos taken of that, and you do think you kind of we have no impression, I think, of what happens to someone when they have been taken.
Yes.
We hear the story about the one guy who was sent to, I think it was El Salvador, who, I forget exactly, was he an American citizen, or at least he was, he had leave to remain or whatever it was in American, like he was American basically, yes. But they just said, well, we can deport you to El Salvador.
Well, they've done that with several people who had the right to stay. Since.
But the question is, like, it feels, I guess, because we're used to having heard these stories to an extent about the Iranian regime. This, like I say, 15 years ago in particular, this was like there was a particular wave of arrests. You kind of, I don't know, you maybe think of it, or it feels somehow ingrained in the country, and you think, are ICE agents acting the same way? Do they have the same kind of, like the torturers, for instance, or interrogators, whatever they might have been called in Iran, or like an official position? It was their job. Are there people under ICE and the kind of, essentially the kind of right-wing militia that's
without a doubt
that have this kind of official job, or is it just
no? Without a doubt, and the jobs are being advertised as super highly paid, right? So
yeah. Well, this is the thing. Like the snatching people off the street jobs for certain are, but then what happens behind the scenes? I don't know. Are we going to start seeing these stories? It feels really scary because all of a sudden it starts to feel very plausible.
Yes. Well, and what's scary, even as a starting point, whoever thought that we would be comparing the United States of America to Iran? Yeah, on civil rights issues. I mean, it's almost kind of unbelievable how that particular country has descended so quickly.
Yeah, it's true. It's interesting how while Trump is fighting to win an election, while he's out of power and he's annoyed at Joe Biden for having beat him, You've got the Proud Boys and various kind of right-wing groups being vocal, and Trump's kind of calling them out, shouting them out and everything. And then as soon as Trump gets back into power and opens up ICE applications, those right-wing fascist groups don't seem to be there anymore because they're all ICE now.
No,
They've been employed.
Yeah.
By the regime. Anyway.
So I think it's a really marvelous movie, and I encourage everyone to go see it. I was very sad to see, because the film won the Palme d'Or. It's made all of these top 10 lists all over the place, and we were at the Mockingbird at the 6:20 screening, which means a 7 o'clock screening, really. And there was only one other person aside from us, which is, very sad to see, and doesn't speak very well for the state of cinephilia in Birmingham.
No. No, but it was really, really, really worth seeing. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
I think it's also possible to kind of get the impression with, an Iranian film about sort of political prisoners, kind of seeking revenge, that won the Palme d'Or, to imagine it's like dreary and sad and depressing and a hard time. And it's none of those.
It's none of that.
It's a really... Exciting is a little bit too much, but it's a very energetic thriller for what it is, which a film which essentially is quite talky, because there's basically a lot of conversations. Once they've got the guy, it's a lot of conversation about what we're going to do with him, but it's people expressing their thoughts and their histories and their emotions, and it's really brilliantly played.
It's brilliantly played, and it's almost like, I don't know. To me, it acted almost like a piece of theatre in the dramaturgy. It builds and builds, and and it's a film of ideas, and yet it's very suspenseful. It's in quotation marks very entertaining. Like I was gripped by it.
Absolutely. Right? The filmmaking has that wonderful quality of letting the camera sit there and letting the scenes play out. That particular scene that we've mentioned, the climactic scene where they confront Pegleg, and he reveals that he is who he is, and everything, is one take. It's one take that's reasonably tight on him sat tied to that tree, and at first it's Vadim walking around the tree talking to him, and then it's the woman, I should get her name, sorry, not Vadim, Vahid is his name. So he's Vahid and she's Shiva. So it's Vahid at first talking to him, and then when it becomes very clear that it's him and he won't give up whatever, she then, as I said, loses it and comes in, and that's when the kind of the quote-unquote torture starts, or, her kind of move into an aggressive behaviour. But that's all in one take, and it's incredibly intense. The camera doesn't move, it doesn't zoom in, it doesn't intensify itself. The lighting is quite intense, because there's blue night behind them, but the light on them from the brake lights is pure red. It's extremely intense, the colour really pops there, but it's a film that it lets the scene play, it lets the actors do the work, and they're brilliant. They're really brilliant. I thought Vahid, also on the basis that the actor's name is Vahid, I wonder whether he is maybe non-professional, or, well, at least I didn't think he was as good as the rest of them. Nonetheless, but he is good, I think, and the rest of them are fantastic.
All right. We both recommend. So thank you all very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and YouTube Music. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. I'll tell you one more thing. This is on Panahi's Wikipedia page. He's one of only 4 directors in history to win the top prizes at Europe's 3 major film festivals. He won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, the Golden Bear at Berlin, and the Golden Lion at Venice.
There you go.
Do you know who the other 3 directors are?
Who?
Henri-Georges Clouzot, Antonioni, and Robert Altman.
Oh, wow.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I'm glad to see Clouzot in that list, actually.
I know, it's interesting, isn't it?